By the way, are you a government agent? Danny's growing obsession. Hello there, heroes! I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome to another Kamen Rider Dragon Knight episode review. Listen, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on it. I'm working on it. It being a schedule for working on videos that gets these Kamen Rider Dragon Knight episode reviews out on a more regular basis. Last time, Kit started getting really insecure over the badass Kase, aka Kamen Rider Siren. Danny just about lost his mind in grief over his brother, and at the last second, a Dark Rider attacked from inside the mirror. Let's see just what crawled out of the mirror as we take a look at the 24th episode of Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, Dark Temptation.
Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel.
Yeah, and make sure you got your notifications set up by hitting that little bell icon.
Right you. What he said was, you can consider checking us out on Patreon or Ko-fi at Orange Ranger Videos. Right you.
Having been thrown into a mirror in his apartment at the end of the previous episode, Kit arrives in some underground tunnels. Already transformed. He didn't even come out of a reflective surface. Despite all that, this is actually a great fight scene. I will say the lighting is a little bad down there, and since the other rider is just Dragon Knight but in black, it could get a little hard to tell who is who. DK gets some great hits in at first, but then the dark copy pulls a Drag Blacker card and uses his attack vent. The Drag Blacker corners Kit and blasts at him, but he dodges it and the shot blows up a nearby wall. Conveniently, right behind that wall is Drag Redder, and the two dragons start fighting as the two riders do. The tide of the fight turns at this point as the Dark Rider just starts violently beating Dragon Knight around. He finally collapses, and the Dark Rider moves in to strike a killing blow until Kit hears a knock at his door and wakes up.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Kit was violently beaten around until he was knocked unconscious. And yet the dream continued until he was about to get hit by an attack that he couldn't possibly have been aware of. I suppose this isn't impossible. Anything's possible in dreams, number one. And number two, I have had some dreams where weirdly I was both myself and someone else. I just really feel like that when Kit was knocked out, he would have woken up. The knock on the door is from Michelle, who Kit has never actually met in person, so he doesn't know who she is at first. She doesn't really play the whole government agent card directly, just saying that she's a friend of Maya's, but that some important people in Washington would like to talk to Kamen Rider Dragon Knight about Ventara and Xaviax. Kit blows her off and leaves, and she phones her fellow agents basically saying the asking nicely approach didn't work, it's time to bring him in. JTC returns to Xaviax's palace, where the general assumes that Danny has been taken care of. Strike tells the truth, he didn't vent him, but he did beat some sense into him. Optimistic thinking, he didn't actually beat some sense into him, but he really wanted to think that he did. Xaviax moves to punish him for this, but he begs and explains that without Danny, it's 1-on-3 against him. He suggests kidnapping Kit's dad again, but Xaviax says he has a more direct approach, and also makes very clear that any consequences that derive from leaving Danny unvented are on JTC's head. And hey, here's some proof that Danny hasn't had that sense beaten in. This is actually a really nice, moody flashback sequence with dark, ominous music that really reflects this growing obsession that Danny has. He promises his brother that no one is going to stop him this time, and he rides off in search of Dragon Knight. Len is on top of a building brooding when Kase comes to ask him what's up. He says that the fight against Xaviax was so much easier the first time. There wasn't all of this deception involved. And we get An original flashback, for lack of a better term. It's Ryuki footage in the context of Ventaran riders fighting. We see all of the riders fighting against some of Xaviax's grunts, including riders that we've only previously seen being evil, like Strike and Torque. They're fighting these white spider kind of like grunts, but when they're defeated, these really weird blue dragonfly head guys hatch out of them. Back in the present, Len says that everything's more difficult now, fighting rider on rider and being the leader of the good guys. He tells her about Chris, a Marine that was vented under his leadership. Kase says what I did at the time. Chris was a soldier and he knew the risks of combat, but that this is what worries her about Kit. When the time comes, will Kit be ready to make that kind of sacrifice and fight full on for Earth and Ventara? What time? The battle is now. Now is the time. Anyway, Len says that he will be, and she says that his word is good enough for her. Oh, goody. Lacey. And she's even more annoying than usual this time. She storms straight into the bookstore without even saying hello to anyone, marching straight to the paranormal section. Maya and Trent walk up and try to say hello, but she pretends not to notice them at first, before saying that she's just so focused on boning up on all of this paranormal stuff, so that she and Maya can be friends again.
Shut up! As in, close your mouth and stop talking.
Maya says, of course, that's not necessary. They're still friends, but it's clear to the audience that this is Lacey's new plan to constantly be in the bookstore and to keep an eye on Maya. She shoos them away, and this is when Kit comes in. He does know who Michelle is, and he relates to Maya about how she came by and catches them up on that whole thing. Trent relates to Kit that this is bad. Like, government agents grilling him about interdimensional power armor and dissecting Len at Area 51. Bad. Lacey is still watching from nearby and clearly starts to feel guilty at the harm her little computer trick has done. They wonder how Michelle would have gotten her hands on all this information, and Maya concludes that her laptop might be compromised. She runs a security scan, which, in a difference from a normal security scan, doesn't display if there are any viruses or if there are any spyware, just relating to her that 52 of her secure files were downloaded. Trent asks if Michelle might be working for the government. You know, the you-know-who. Voldemort? And Maya says she's gonna find out, making a call.
Who you gonna call?
Ghostbusters!
No, it turns out that Maya was just directly calling Michelle. Maya, what was your plan? Were you just going to be like, hey, Michelle, it's Maya. Listen, I just wanted to say, no hard feelings about the whole getting me fired from way above top secret thing. Greener pastures and all that. By the way, are you a secret federal agent? Michelle ignores the call, declaring that she's got to change the number on that cell phone, and yeah, that's a pretty basic mistake for a Fed to make. She checks in with the stereotypical black truck filled with federal agents doing surveillance, and she hops inside. Back in the bookstore, Kit hears the shimmers and starts to leave, but Maya promises she's going to get to the bottom of this. Meanwhile, a very interesting conversation back with Kase and Len. They're basically setting the table on what's left. Len says that the only riders that Xaviax has left are Axe and Strike. But Kamen Rider Wrath hasn't turned up yet, and he hasn't been able to find Wrath's Earth double. Kase says they need to find that person, because if that man is half the fighter the Ventaran Wrath is, they're in for quite a battle. Then they also hear the shimmers. What follows is an original fight scene with Wing Knight and Siren taking on Gel Newts. Besides the fact that there are palm trees everywhere, you see some of that in Japanese footage, but not as much as you do in Los Angeles, there are just some slight, barely noticeable differences in fight choreography and filming style. Meanwhile, Kit runs around cluelessly, apparently unable to find where this fight is taking place. Siren starts taking some hits from the gel newts, and for someone who loves to crow, bird pun, how much better a fighter she is than Kit, I don't feel like he's taken any hits from the gel newts in quite some time. Wing Knight jumps in and defends her, beating them away. Then, a red monster that kind of looks like a mutated Flash from DC jumps in and attacks. They struggle with that for a bit, and Siren tells Wing Knight to get his final vent ready, that they're gonna do this old style. Meanwhile, Kit finally finds the right reflective surface and walks into Ventara without having his armor on. Of course, he walks up just as the fight actually ends. Len good-naturedly tells him that he'll be there for the next one, but he walks off in a huff. This time, Len chases him down and asks him what his deal is. He's been glowing Kit up to Kase since she got here, and he keeps showing up acting like a spoiled brat. He sarcastically apologizes for offending Kase, and says that maybe he just doesn't understand because he's not a real Kamen Rider. Finally fed up with all of this, Len says, yeah, why don't you come back when you got that all sorted out? As Kit leaves, a concerned Kase points out that this is exactly how it started with Adam, the Ventaran Kamen Rider Dragon Knight. Petty little squabbles turned into betraying them all to Xaviax. Hey, speaking of, Kit goes to visit his dad in the hospital, but finds a man standing over him. The man that was Charlie Feathers to Brad Barrett, Agent Simons to Chris Ramirez, and the man you knew as Kamen Rider Camo called him Captain Maddox. My gods, they really did not give that character a name. Anyways, yes, it's Xaviax in the flesh. Kit asks Xaviax what he wants, but Xaviax says the same thing as always. Kit's help. He moves back over Kit's dad, concerning him, but Xaviax just hushes him. He flows energy into the man, and Kit's dad starts to actually wake up. There is an audible clunk, and Kit puts everything together. Like, not just that Xaviax caused his dad's condition, but that Xaviax has been manipulating him from the very beginning. He has been the dad speaking to Kit. Find the deck. Merge with the dragon. Think about yourself. All of it. He accuses Xaviax of tricking him. Ooh. But Xaviax just points out that it looks like his dad is ready to talk. Then the exchange that literally gave me chills. How do I know that this isn't another trick? Because it doesn't need to be.
Yes! Yes!
Okay, seriously. I don't want to disrespect the profession of character acting. It's a great profession in Hollywood. But I don't see how William O'Leary was just a character actor after his performance in this show. He owns the screen. He perfectly toes that line between campy and serious, and he's had to portray several different kinds of characters while also staying the same character. I'm sorry, I'm gushing again. Let's just continue. Kit kind of tests his dad, asking about a bike trip that they took when he was a little younger, and his dad remembers all of it very clearly. In fact, that was the moment that he saw something in the mirror, and all of this began. Kit very quickly tries to get his dad's permission, basically, to save the world instead of taking Xaviax's deal to save him, asking him hypothetically, which seems kind of against the point, if he would give up the person he loved most to save 1,000 random strangers. He starts to answer, once again relating that blood is thicker than motor oil line, which does kind of actually establish that that line is something that he said, although Xaviax would have pulled it from his memory anyway, so maybe that was a useless point. but then says, in this case, before suddenly cutting off and becoming catatonic once again. The thing is, there's not really suspense in this, though. It was pretty clear what he was going to say. Blood is thicker than motor oil, but in this case, implies that he was going to say the opposite. Xaviax pops back into the room. Time's up. Kit demands his father back, and Xaviax says, of course, he's more than willing to do that. Kit's powers of perception now stretch a little beyond the obvious, as he realizes that Xaviax has been manipulating him really from the beginning, ever since his dad disappeared. Xaviax is the one behind all of his mysterious theft troubles, stealing things that the cops then thought Kit stole. In fact, he could have even been using... Actually, let's hang on to that thought for now. Kit can't believe that he thought he was different. He was special as part of the Riders, the only one that Xaviax didn't manipulate. Turns out he's just like all the rest of them. But Xaviax says, oh, no, Kit is special. You see, Kit had a very unique mixture of no vices and no ambitions. So Xaviax couldn't come up with a pitch that would lure him in. But he was pretty sure that he loved dear old dad. He makes his pitch, and gods, Xaviax is good at this. Kit already knows what the price is, venting Wing Knight. Xaviax says, yeah, that really shouldn't be that big a deal. Since Siren showed up, he doesn't want you around anyway. And besides, eventually he's going to ask you to sacrifice your life for Ventara, a world that isn't even yours. Just like Chris did. He decides to show himself out as Kit is left thunderstruck. He thinks for a moment, then awkwardly declares, Kamen Rider Wing Knight, before walking off. And that's where it ends. Let's read the cards. Episode 24, Dark Temptation. Pros, Xaviax, William O'Leary Xaviax. Nice original fight scene, and Danny's growing obsession. Cons, this episode has a really slow start. The Dark Rider stuff just seems like a weird dream aside at this point, and Michelle is an ineffective government agent. This episode ramps at a perfect 45-degree angle, getting better and better as it goes along. But in the end, that does leave it the sum of its parts. Average. The O'Leary performance is just too good, though, so Dark Temptation gets 3.5 cards out of 5. Oh good, I hear you say, rolling your eyes. Orange Ranger is gonna gush about Xaviax some more. Listen, just watch this episode. Watch Xaviax calmly and coolly control the room. The sheer confidence. It doesn't have to be a trick. He knows that he's got Kit. A plan spanning probably a decade or more, finally coming to fruition. This actor is best known for playing Tim the Toolman Taylor's brother as a recurring role on Home Improvement. It really just shows how much kids' TV is dismissed in the greater scheme of Hollywood. Of course, this entire show is criminally overlooked.
What is this I'm sitting on? Oh, it's a box of soap.
Don't let me overstate this pro, because the original fight scene with Wing Knight and Siren versus the Grunts does feel more than a little token. I had been thinking just at that point in the episode that we needed something action-y to happen, and there's a fight, voila. But it is still nice to see the original footage. The differences in the footage are noticeable, but as I mentioned, that really just makes it feel more fresh. It's kind of funny for me to be saying this, as I've only seen one episode of Kamen Rider Ryuki, but even just being able to tell the difference between the Japanese footage and the American footage makes the American footage feel, well, original. Kids shows dealing with any sort of mental illness are always going to be a little hit or miss, and to be completely fair, nobody has really pointed out Danny as being obsessed with venting Dragon Knight. But why don't you let one neurodivergent reviewer call it as he sees it? The sequence with the flashbacks just paints it really clearly. Danny has been threatened by Xaviax, threatened and beaten around by Strike, and he's still talking about venting Dragon Knight. That is an obsession, and in a show like this, a kid's show, it's kind of a nice element to include. Remember how I said at the point of the original fight scene that I was thinking that the show really needed to add an action hook somewhere around here? Yeah, like I said, this episode ramps up at a 45-degree angle, which means it starts real slow. Okay, yes, the episode starts with a fight, but the fight is a dream sequence, so I didn't really count it. But even if we do, after that fight, Michelle talks to Kit. JTC talks to Xaviax. Danny talks to his vented brother. Kase talks to Len. Lacey talks to Maya and Trent. Kit talks to Maya and Trent. And then Len and Kase talk again before we finally get another fight scene.
Should we do something? We should do something! Should we do something?
Do something! Do something!
Do something!
I went back and checked, and after the Dark Rider, yes, the Dark Rider has a name, you know how I handle these things, I will tell you when the show tells us, and Dragon Knight Dream Fight, we go nearly 10 minutes before the next fight scene. I was reminded going back through that we did get that flashback sequence of the riders fighting those white grunts that turned into blue dragonfly things, but a flashback is like a dream, so I don't count that either. In a show about a war, 10 minutes without a fight, a legitimate fight, is a long time. Speaking of fights that don't count, listen, I've seen the show beginning to end. I know what's going on with all of the Dark Rider stuff, but I really wanted to try to step back and take a look at this episode to episode and how it felt. And at this point, it feels like a really cheap action sequence that just ended up being a dream. I think I was really disappointed when I saw this for the first time. This cool black version of Dragon Knight that can kick Kit's butt. That's hard to say. And it just ended up being a dream. It probably felt like they were just burning some Ryuki footage to pad out the episode. And you might think that being revealed to not be a snarky, vindictive reporter, but a government agent would transform Michelle Walsh into this strong, intelligent character. No, not really. Her approach to bringing in Kit was to go to his apartment and ask him to come in. You have the profile on this guy. Did you really think he was going to be like, sure, let's go. Can we get some coffee on the way? Maybe a donut? I'm a little bit hungry. Either question him there in the apartment. You can even leave out the government stuff and just pretend that you had a change of heart and you're doing a story that's going to get Maya back into Way Above Top Secret. Or, just bring him in. You have him connected to some weird stuff. That's enough to at least bring him in for questioning. And then when he blows her off, and again, this is a government agent, and leaves, she calls her fellow agents and says he's headed for the bookstore. Then she gets in the surveillance van. And what comes of that? Absolutely nothing, at least as far as this episode. Kit does go to the bookstore. Kit then leaves the bookstore, and she does absolutely nothing. Really not looking that effective there, Miss Walsh. Started weak, ended strong. At least it got better, right? Let's see if we can stay at that high level by taking a peek at the 25th episode of Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, Dropping the Axe. The Dark Rider pursues Wing Knight and Siren. Or does he? The vengeful Axe still wants to end Dragon Knight, but Strike opposes him. Xaviax reveals his ultimate secret weapon. That is going to do it for another Kamen Rider Dragon Knight episode review. Once again, like the intro, I'm not going to stretch this out, but I want to thank everybody that watches these videos for their patience. I've kind of prioritized my Orange Ranger Plays channel, and that's not really fair to this channel, which actually has more viewers, more subscribers. I'm working on balancing those two. Like I said, I'm working on a schedule where hopefully I can push out enough Orange Ranger Plays content pre-uploaded to take some time to work on these and then kind of cycle that back and forth so both are releasing content all the time. But like I said, I'm making this outro too long. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button right down below the video to like this video. And while you're down there, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the Dark Rider. You know, you can say what their name is if you want to just call them by name. I'm not going to say it in a video until it's revealed. But what do you think of this Dark Rider? Dark and mysterious and literally dreamy, right? So that's going to wrap it up. And until next time, may the power of the cards protect you.